Hi, and welcome to Optimizing Chocolatey Packages for Others. Before we begin, I'd like to just throw another big thanks to everyone who's helped organize and enable PowerShell Conference Europe, as it's been really cool to see so many people out here. And a big thanks to the sponsor of the event, including Chocolatey, which is obviously what we're here to talk about. Who am I? You may have met me already, guarding the stack of t-shirts over there, mostly small t-shirts now. I'm James Ruskin, and I'm currently employed by Chocolatey Software as a package and infrastructure engineer. On Tuesdays, at least, I moonlight as a community moderator on the Chocolatey Community Repository, and despite being a pretty long-term user of it, I've been surprised at how much I actually didn't know about it when I was just using it recreationally. Some of the frequently asked questions I've seen since being a moderator kind of inspired this talk a little bit. Finally, I've maintained packages both as a part of my job for many years and just for fun more recently. As I said in a previous talk, I have a weird relationship with WordFun, and I apologize for that. By the way, if you want to chat about any of this afterwards, you can actually find me outside or on various places online as JP Ruskin, or even on the Chocolatey Community Discord. So what's this optimistically titled talk going to cover? First, we're going to run through what the Chocolatey Community Repository is. And it will be shortened to CCR in many cases because it's a lengthy name and hard to fit on PowerPoint slides in large size of text. But we're going to demonstrate how to create a package that you might want to push. Sorry, we're going to cover what happens when a package is pushed to the Chocolatey Community Repository. We're going to demonstrate how to create a package that you might push to the Chocolatey Community Repository or any other repository that you control. How you might want to modify those packages for best interacting with Package Internalizer, which is something that we offer licensed customers, and how you might want to modify things so that you can write automatic update scripts easily. Please also mention if I'm going too fast, I can slow down, maybe. Just to cover all the bases, although I think everyone in here probably knows, we're just going to quickly cover what Chocolatey is. So has anybody actually not heard of or used Chocolatey who's attended this talk? Cool. Then I'll run through this very quickly. Chocolatey is obviously a package manager for Windows, similar to apt, homebrew, or yum, and when it was first created, there was nothing like it available. It can be used for just about anything, and that's down to it using PowerShell under the hood. So as we can all appreciate, PowerShell is a brilliant tool for automating just about anything on Windows. It's supported on Windows 8.1 and up, and Windows Server 2008 R2 in Azure and up, although I'm going to tell you for this that it's 2012 R2, because 2008 is just in Azure. And though it does work on Windows 7 and Windows Server 2003, there are some hoops you have to jump through to be able to access the community repository and do other parts that are useful. So, that said, what is the community repository I keep talking about? It's a publicly available repository of community-maintained Chocolatey packages that you can go and browse through at community.chocolatey.org/packages. It currently contains some 9,200 odd packages, or it did at one point. The number really fluctuates a fair amount. So it's got a lot of unique packages, most of which have a bunch of versions available. It's enabled on all Chocolatey CLI installations by default, and it's the default source that it'll use unless you take steps to disable it. We allow anybody, until proven guilty, to publish packages with a few conditions that we'll go into in a second. And that's all pending verification, validation, and review by automated services and volunteer moderators alike. But what actually happens when a package is pushed to the repository? For that, we're going to turn over to the arduous adventures of Penny Package and the tale of trials and tribulations on her journey to the Chocolatey Community Repository. You might notice that I am not employed by Chocolatey as an artist, and I apologize for this. At least I didn't spend a lot of time drawing out a series of things that she had to go through. But what happens to your bright eye package when it's pushed to the CCR? To put it in short, there's a series of automated inspections, the potential requirement for intervention by a moderator, and for untrusted packages, an actual inspection of the changes or the first versions, new spec, and scripts. So, pretty much done. Q&A. Thank you for all coming. But no, that might actually be a bit short, even for me. So, let's go into it, although this is going to be a little more dry, so I apologize. The first step that packages go through when they're pushed to the CCR is package validation. If you've built a package before from template or from scratch, you've probably had to deal with a new spec file. This is an XML file that within each package that's nearly what NuGet uses, but it's been extended in a few ways for Chocolatey packages. There's around 70 rules currently in the form of automated tests that run against each package after submission. making sure that, for example, links to documentation and sources are present and correct. There's a description of an appropriate length. Non-functional chunks of the template code we're going to go into in a second have been removed because it's cruft. Popular files that shouldn't be included in a package aren't there. So, for example, if you include a git ignore file in a package, that's probably not supposed to be there. And the various scripts pass muster. Checksums are used if appropriate, all that sort of thing. Pretty basic checks, but happens here. These are classed appropriately in requirements, guidelines, and suggestions, from definite things that we're going to need you to do before we approve it, down to things we'd prefer you do, but actually don't mind. There's a whole lot of detail, and the link at the bottom there. It's a bit lengthy, but the thing to remember is docs.chocolatey.org, which is a fantastic resource for seeing more stuff about this. After that, we verify the package. Well, as you know, packages generally install something, configure something, or drop some helpful files somewhere in your system. We install and uninstall the package on a pretty temporary Vagrant VM and upload the logs to a gist. This should expose undeclared prerequisites, which is something that we quite like. You should either be listing a dependency in the package or installing it as part of the package so that we can ensure that these packages will work on anyone's machine. Our current target VM is pretty old, which has resulted in some packages needing to be exempted manually and tested manually by moderators again. We are planning to get that upgraded, but that's not happened yet. Once again, link at the bottom for further information. Probably should have done QR codes for you all, I'm sorry. If that all succeeds, we move to checking the package for malware and other nefarious sounding files. We submit it to VirusTotal, which scans it with some 95 odd security vendors last time I checked. And we scan each file that is either inside or downloaded by the package. And until it's given a clean bill of health, or at least within a certain number of detections, we have to account for false flags, etc. Then we will either require a moderator to review it, or we will let it through with a note applied. And I'll show an example of that in a second. Obviously, false positives can happen, as mentioned, and some interesting packages are generated in ways that are similar to viruses or other malware. Examples including installers created with certain Python tools, which frequently come up as having multiple false positives. Script2exe generated binaries, and, of course, tools used for crypto. If that's all looking good, and sometimes even before it is, a volunteer will review the scripts and packages. I stress the word volunteer. The team is utterly fantastic, a wonderful bunch of folk who've seen countless packages, but in the absence of some grand machine learning project that knows PowerShell intimately, there is an unfortunate bottleneck due to the importance of queue review life balance. Moderators like the cake is NaOH, Pascal Berger, M. Kevin, I'm sorry, I'm going to read off the screen very directly at this point because I'll otherwise get it horribly wrong. FLC DRG, Manfred, Virtual Alex, Vex32, Paul Broadwith, Gary Ewan Park, Josh King, and Kim Nordmo all put a lot of love into this, but they don't have all the time in the world to do it, and everything else they do. So anyway, someone reviews the scripts and package, following the guidelines that I've, again, linked to at the bottom. And just make sure that they're not messily invoking some base64 chunk of code or downloading files from megauploadbin.com or a source that isn't the original software author's released source. It's not duplicating another package, and the binaries aren't included if the license prohibits redistribution, which is, of course, an issue that we have to get around. There may be some back and forth here, as new packages adjust their code and metadata appropriately and repush non-approved versions until they are approved, or until it looks good. A mild point here is that for those that don't get approved, packages that get pushed back for changes will go into a kind of limbo state. They're going to wait for a maintainer's response. They'll get notified by email if they've enabled that, and the package will sit in the queue for a little while. We've got a service, however, that runs against packages in this state, and if they age out after a couple of weeks, they will get rejected until requested again by the maintainer. This is so that we don't have things hanging about in the queue for ages that aren't valid and haven't been updated. So anyway, assuming that's all gone well, the package gets approved and is ready for download by the public. Except one other thing, sorry, which is just another step that runs after approval. We have a package cacher, which stores binaries that are downloaded by packages in a private CDN, so the package installed years later should still succeed. I'm sure we've all encountered some Microsoft package or link where the download link is cycled with some string of GUIDs in the middle, or it just doesn't exist. Or Adobe and Chrome packages where the version has changed, the URL has not. So either you have a package that is installing the wrong version of a thing, or the checksum is just broken. The caching CDN tries to mitigate these issues, as well as being a bit of a first line of defense against security supply chain issues. So, let's have a look at some packages, talk about some good practices. Can everybody see this, and is this an appropriately sized font, or would we like it bigger? Fantastic, thank you. So, we have, I am hoping that everyone has at least created, well, I'm hoping that people have created Chocolatey packages. Has anybody not created a Chocolatey package? Fantastic, okay. Lots of easy ways to do that. You can either grab a template from GitHub or simply run choco new with a package name. If you do that, it'll simply spit out a default package. It gives you a lovely to-do list, which contains a lot of information on what you'll need to do when creating, well, when making this package. It gives you the default package new spec with some filled in stuff, a lot of comments on what to do again, and some configuration. And of course, default before modify, uninstall, and install scripts, which again are, in this case, generic to anything that Chocolatey can install, or pretty close. So if I remember correctly, there's a lot of different install types, that Chocolatey it supports, from MSIs to EXEs to just straight dropping binaries into the path. And this pretty much supports all of them. One of the big things that you will see occasionally on Community Repository, if you look at packages that are hanging around in the queue, is that you'll see people who have pushed a package that still has EXE, MSI, or MSU as the file type. This is pretty clear that they haven't actually looked at what they're pushing, which is sad, but it's fair. So it's worth running through if you do get up to one of these templates and just looking at it all and making sure that the comments have been rectified. In comparison, you can also use a template or one of our custom templates. So if you go and have a look at using a template here, we can see that in this case, I think I've pre-installed at least one template. Yeah, so we've got an MSI template. And this is using a far more cut down version of this Choco new template. There's a lot of different ones that are available, and you can actually, oh, sorry, getting out of order, but okay, let's ignore the order then. You can also look on the community repository for a selection of different templates that are available, and there are more on GitHub. But yeah, so you can see there's kind of MSI templates. There's the default template, which is the one we all use. Zip templates for simply downloading and extracting a zip file. A VS Code template, I believe, for extensions. And similarly for Notepad++ there. So lots of different templates you can use. And if you use one, we should be able to see that we've got a similar looking, still a lot of comments, but cut down and at least slightly customized template for use there. You can also create your own custom templates, which is great. Yes, I really enjoy doing that, which is odd, but it's good. And you can customize a template for your own company or for your own users. This looks good. I'll just like that. In terms of Package Internalizer, I mentioned this earlier. It's a tool that we offer to licensed customers for the purpose of automatically taking packages from the community repository, grabbing any links to binaries and such externally, pulling them down, repacking the new peg so that it contains everything you need to install it on an air-gapped or otherwise offline system, and ensuring that it will run. However, there's a couple of little things that are problematic at the moment. We have fixes in for some of them, and some of them we don't. But for example, in terms of tips and tricks for Package Internalizer, we currently have a very enthusiastic link matching string that there are some arguments for. But currently, it will have issues if you have a string that looks like a link, even if it is not supposed to be a link. If you're trying to get around this, you sadly need to break it up so that it doesn't look like it has HTTPS or anything after a HTTP in a string. As I say, the fix for that should be released soon, as it's a little annoying. In terms of importing functions, if you have supporting functions within a Chocolatey package, obviously if you're running a Chocolatey install script, you can do anything that PowerShell can. Within that, if you wanted to use, for example, another module, you would be able to import that. However, if you are importing a simple script and you're dot sourcing it in, the internalizer will attempt to create a script block out of that and then pull it in like that. This will fail occasionally if your script is malformed. The way around that is to simply use import module, and I would always recommend, if you're creating supporting functions, using a PSM1 file. In terms of automatically updating packages, there is a very popular module that is used by a lot of the community repository, the Chocolatey Community Chocolatey Packages team. So this is a gigantic repository for all the packages that are automatically generated within here for the Chocolatey Community Repository. And you can see that we have some 12,500 commits there, which is pretty good. And we have a bunch of runners that are running against this to both validate changes made and to update packages and then push them to the repository. This is actually a really great source for looking for information on how to do packages and how to, if you wanted to, bring packages internally, if you didn't want to drag them straight off the CCR. Under the automatic directory, there is a lot of AU packages, or other packages that use this AU module, which is, I believe, is a shortened version of automatic in this case. And you can inspect any of these. You can actually have a look at some of the patterns that they use to update. In this case, AU uses a series of functions that are global, and then it runs, when you call the last function, it runs everything in order. So you say update, ignoring checksum, and it will go and it will run these functions that you've defined. This one here, assert replace, is for modifying files such as the verification txt here, and you can do similar things for checksums and URLs within the install scripts. Before update is obviously, in this case, a way to, let me close this because this is a little short, I'm sorry. Before update is something where you can, for example, find the latest release. In this case, yeah, we're just using a web client going to get the remote files. And yeah, and so basically, yeah, it'll run before everything happens and then work. Because of the way the replacements are done, you can certainly either contain your binaries in an unversioned form, so you download them directly into the package and then as a generically titled file, if you will. This is okay in most cases. Obviously, Chocolatey, when adding things to the path, by default, only allows a single version of a given package to be installed at any given time. So having a single named thing on path is going to be okay there. It may have trouble if you allow multiple side-by-side installs, but that's mostly okay. The other thing to bear in mind there is that if you are using regex replacement, then you may want to ensure that your variables for stuff like file path and checksums are on separate lines and easily identifiable so that you can run replacements without worrying about other places that they might be. However, if you didn't want to use AU, you might just write something yourself. So here's an example of that. As you can see, it's basically the same thing. You're grabbing your latest release. If you want, you can check if there is a package available for that version before you operate any further. And that will allow you to cut off runtimes if you're using GitHub Actions. Yes?
What triggers the AU to run?
As in the script or in general? So in the case of the Community Packages repository, I believe it's GitHub Actions runners. So they're on a schedule. Yeah. So in theory, you could also use webhooks or something similar to that, even an RSS feed, and just run off that. But in this case, GitHub Actions is where it's at. But yeah, so you will run through what packages are available, what package is currently released. You can check that and return if there's no update required to ensure that you're using fewer minutes or however you want to judge that. You can then do replacements within your install PS1 or any other files that you want. Repack it with version. So one thing that's worth noting is that the new spec will need a valid version to be in there, otherwise it won't build. But you can supply an argument for version, and that will replace the value in there automatically. There's no such functionality currently for the Chocolatey install script. But yes, and again, keeping things so that they can easily be matched is very helpful in this case. A good pattern. I think I was also going to jump into showing, just briefly, an example of that exact same package, which, and you can see here that we have validation testing passed, verification testing passed. You can click through to the details. You can see the gist from verification, where it's installed and uninstalled. This may be far too small. And it obviously goes into the most verbose state you can find. And then it does also have a couple of detections. So you can see when you scroll down that if you look at the virus scan results, we've had a couple of detections on, for example, the 64-bit version. You can click through to virus total, and see what's there. But in a lot of cases, it gives you a nice reasoning for it being there. And of course, you can also see the queue here, which shows that it passes validation, and so on. I'm afraid I may have burnt through my demos again a little fast. So in a more serious way, are there any questions? Yeah.
For PowerShell models, Chocolatey versus PowerShell Gallery, what do you suggest?
For PowerShell modules, would I install them from Chocolatey CCR or would I install them from PowerShell Gallery? I know a few people who are very happy to use the CCR versions above the Gallery because the Gallery is a little flaky, as we all know. Personally, what we'd recommend probably is that you internalize them to a repository under your own control. So sorry, a bit of a neither answer there, but using Chocolatey for that is very reasonable to do. Yes?
Do you have tooling to set up, like on-prem, the testing and package validation? Do you have documentation on how to do that?
So we do offer the Vagrant machine that we use for the validation. I believe it uses Vagrant and Sandbox, the Sandbox plugin for Vagrant. I believe it's available. I would have to double check, I'm afraid.
Yes, it is.
It is, thank you. Gabriel.
What is the advantage of importing the module in an extra file instead of importing it in Chocolatey install PS1?
What is the advantage of importing additional supported functions and modules within the, as in not containing the functions within Chocolatey install rather than having them externally? To my mind, at least, the advantage is that you can contain the modules and functions separately, so you can test them, and then you can have the Chocolatey install script just be the install script.
You might use them in both the install and uninstall.
And of course, you may use them in both the install and uninstall. Thank you. Anybody else at all? Yes?
Are there any other common pitfalls that you see with package developers and package
Are there any other pitfalls that I see for package maintainers and package developers? Yes, but I feel like it's such a broad question that I, should have covered more. I'm unsure, but I would like to continue the conversation later if that's all right with you. Yes?
Just a comment for that. At least when you're using AU, you kind of have to write logic. Like if the download side, you kind of manually check the download side. And if you don't have logic to actually fail, if that doesn't really work, then you will potentially have code that will just say there's never a new version if they actually change the location. So there's still some kind of manually check at least once in a while.
Yeah, that's very fair.
Don't code yourself out of that.
Yeah. No, that's it. So sorry, the response there was that you may still need to have some manual verification that your automatic update scripts are running correctly, because you may lose out on if they do change the download location and you have an automatic package that is just checking that you're up to date, then you may never get a higher version with that. So you need to check occasionally. Anything else from anybody else? Okay. So in summary, packages can take a bit of time to get through the approval process, and I am sorry about that. That you may have some amazing skills in PowerShell. As with aliases, if you want to share your code, it's best to write it legibly. And this, as it happens, will also, if you're following good practices, probably mean that your packages will be reviewed faster, because it's easier for us to read. Regularly submitting good packages, of course, as well, will mean that you may be counted as a trusted package, which will, again, speed up the rate of review, unless you trigger other issues with, say, AV. If you want to chat about any of this, find me later, or join the community Discord server, which I have made a QR code for, on cho.co/community, or ch0.co/community, and chat with all the lovely folk who hang out there. That's it, I'm afraid. Thank you very much for your time. And again, please feel free to come find me if you'd like to chat more. Paul and I will actually be demonstrating some more Chocolatey stuff over in the park area, near around 1:45. So if that would be helpful. So, thank you.